The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Merry meet and merry part, bright the cheeks and warm the heart. For tread the circle thrice about, to keep unwelcome spirits out. Bide within the law you must, in perfect love. Perfect trust. Mind the threefold laws you should, 3 times bad and 3 times good. These 8 words the read fulfill, and ye harm none, do what ye
will. Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Merry meet and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Tonight we're going to be talking about survival of the spirit with my guest, Mark Yama. Now, he's a clinical psychologist, university professor, and the author of the book, The Spirit Transcendent, which he came on a couple of months ago to talk about in general. And it was about how a few years ago his academic traditional background and clinical practice kind of led him into a non-traditional direction. And we didn't have a whole lot of time to delve into that fact. You know, we were more talking about the book. Yeah. So Mark is here to share one of the stories, or maybe 2, depending, that we didn't get a chance to tell. So for those listening in the chat room, comments and questions are welcome, as always. And if you're listening live and not in chat, you can join us at paraxradionetwork.com. So, Mark, welcome back. And I think before we jump into what we're going to jump into, you might want to offer an explanation and a backstory about what we're doing.
Oh, absolutely. And thanks for the introduction. And, well, if there was a listener from last time, what happened is it seemed like we were so the context of the story took a long time to explain, and I never did get a chance to talk about some of these spiritual stories. Now, you know, I'm a psychologist, and you could almost call them spiritual case histories. You know, and I could do that for an hour. I could do that for 2 hours, but there's a whole interlocked set that occupies about half of the book that I'd like to talk about, and the theme is survival of the personality or the spirit after death, and I'd just love to talk with you about that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so to get the context here, so you mentioned, here I am, a university professor and psychologist, and with a traditional background. And also, not much, in retrospect, I suppose there's some spiritual experiences that I had way in the distant past. But, there is some corner of my mind, I'm not thinking about them, and I basically have taken on the culture of sort of materialism, and, just scientific psychology. And, but as a psychologist, I really value, really listening to your client. I mean, I think it's very distancing and not very helpful if you're judgmental or you don't take what they're saying seriously. And so I do think, that there is this, if you're just being a good therapist, you're open in a way because you're really listening, you're really listening to the patient. Now, and then the plot thickens when I encountered this first individual who I call Betty in the book. And so, we could have another episode on Betty, but we're not. Betty, though, was a very interesting character. I mean, she was this impoverished woman who was so poor that, instead of a walking stick, she used a tree branch. And instead of, she couldn't afford dentures, so she didn't have any teeth and she didn't have any dentures. And she had a 7th grade education, and back in the day when she was younger, her job was actually being a goat shepherd, in the mountains of Idaho. She was a shepherd, an actual literal shepherd. Huh. But she had, a lifetime of these spiritual experiences, and I just was in awe and began to work with her. And in fact, I didn't charge for psychotherapy. I just met with her time after time for 2.5 years. And so, but now, here's the plot thickens again, because all of these other people started popping up. we talked about this. Why is that? But they started popping up, and I would have all kinds of spiritual stories from my clients. And the whole theme here is that, nobody knew about my interests. There wasn't any picture on the wall to cue them. I'm not advertising for, people interested in spirituality. These things just came up in the course of my usual practice. And, some of these things, if you really pay attention and don't discard them, were really kind of shook me, because it just couldn't be. And, so if I'm going to be honest, intellectually honest, there's something wrong here with the materialist point of view.
Anyway, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. Did you think it was just coincidence?
You know what? I think I probably had 2 zones in my mind. One was the sort of normal, materialist psychologist doing his job, and the other having an acceptance of like, oh wow, there's something else going on here, almost like a division, Yeah. So
okay, just
now,
curious.
I spent 2.5 years with the first person, and then other stories, and then after she passed away of cancer, then not that many months later, this second person, who I call Carol in the book, came on the scene, and so now I can get to tell you about the first aspect of the story, and I'll give you a spoiler which is appropriate. The spoiler is that the survival of the spirit is going to be the survival of this person's spirit, of Carol's spirit.
Okay.
And I think I have as convincing evidence for survival of the spirit as you're going to find anywhere. Well, I'll draw back because you probably have more experience, and some of your listeners have more experience about this than I do. But the level of evidence just, again, blew me away. So that's the story we're going to tell.
All right, that sounds good. And over time, as we were talking, you're getting a little bit more comfortable, maybe, is that the right word, with these kinds of things happening around, and you're probably a little bit more alert to them?
Yes, I would say I am. And I guess I would put myself in the category of, being a seeker. Since our last talk, I became very interested actually in Wicca and some of the things that your readers know very well, and it's fascinating to me. It just seems like it's an avenue to experience some of these things, and that's in itself is another story. Because here, I had no idea. I had no idea until I stumbled upon you and some of the books in Wicca, and why didn't I have any idea? I think it's because it's so easy to have a mindset that just ignores it,
Yeah, well, there wouldn't have been any reason for you to maybe even think about until you started getting these clients that all had kind of metaphysical things attached to them. Right. And they always say that things don't always come to you well, they do come to you when you least expect it, but it's because that's the time that you can embrace it and believe it, whereas maybe 10 years ago you couldn't.
Oh, I can say that would be true. And, and I can almost say that if it weren't for that first person, Betty, in the book, I couldn't have been sensitive to Carol. I mean, you know, it's like she had to kind of break down my barrier slowly over a couple of years.
And baby steps follow. So this is good. Open-minded. Yeah. All right. So do you want to get started with it then?
Yes. Let me. So let me tell you a little bit about Carol. So now I am doing my work, my clinical work, is with chronic pain patients. And Carol had cancer that was metastasizing. And so that then made her, you know, she had problems with pain management. And I'm not even sure how it is we got together or under what circumstance, but I do remember in our very first meeting, I was surprised that she had no fear of death whatsoever, you know? I mean, she was mostly concerned with people she would leave behind. And it's kind of like, you know, well, aren't you afraid of death, I might ask? And I think, if I can remember back then, she would say something like, well, that's not a problem. Well, so now that my antennae have been sensitized, it's natural to ask, well, why is that? You know? And so she had a near-death experience, very profound one, when she was 16 years old. You know, and then by this time I had understood enough that, I could say, a near-death experience. And by the way, amazingly enough, there are so many people with a near-death experience that no longer fear death. Right? You would think if you were close to death, you would be worried about it. You'd be afraid of it, right? But it's like, and this is in the literature too. There's these people, they just no longer fear it.
Right.
Well, she was one of those. And the other thing that was amazing to me as a psychologist is when she goes back and explains her near-death experience. I mean, it was probably 40 years ago, but it was as if it were yesterday, you know, like she's in touch with the spirit when she talks about it. She's crying. Now, as a psychologist, she's in my office. I'm thinking, you're crying while you're mourning. Actually, the near-death experience that she had was during childbirth. She's only 16 years old. She had this child out of wedlock, and the child didn't make it. It died in childbirth. Sad. So she's crying. She's telling me about this story, and naturally I'm thinking, oh, you're crying because of the loss of your baby. But it turned out, no, she wasn't crying for that reason. I mean, there was loss there. She was crying because she remembered the beauty of being near death, and in her mind and in her understanding was close to heaven, the joy of it, which is like, okay, so this is the kind of thing that captivated me. And so now, we actually formed a bond, and it's in the book, and I guess probably not really too much of my story that I'm going to tell here, but I connected her. She had one of her problems was having anybody believe her experience. And I connected her with another person who actually was the janitor in the pain clinic who had another profound experience. And then there was a third person. And after a while, we kind of met as a group. And it was a sort of a spiritual group, in a way, all of whom had near-death experiences, except me. You know, I'm the obtuse one. But
there you go.
But they did. All right. So now, by the way, let me take a breath.
Okay.
Make sense so far? Are you ready for another person?
Yes.
Okay. So now I have another patient who I had actually seen way before Carol. Many, many years I had seen her, and she is also a chronic pain patient. She also has a lot of health problems, and she's actually in the book under my section on near-death experiences because she had one too. And it was similar in a way to Carol's because she had it during childbirth, her first pregnancy and childbirth, but it came out well. But she had this ecstatic experience, and if I may quote her, maybe to her embarrassment, she said to me, "Dr. Yama, it was like an orgasm magnified by 1,000." You know,
that emotionally, yeah. Wow.
yeah, you know. Okay, so this other woman. Now we're going to talk about Monica. I'm calling her Monica, and she's Monica in the book. But she's a very sweet woman. You would enjoy her. And so sometime later, we're working together, and she's having some unusual experiences. She is, well, traditionally, you know, we would call them hallucinations, but you could also call them visions, and be very difficult to tell the difference. But like she goes to the grocery store, and there's this woman who gives her a sample of gummy bears, and then takes her aside and says something like, "Can I pray for you? And I know that you're sick." She was sick, you know, and trust, you know, it's something like trust in the higher power. And this happened like 3 times. There are these people that just pop up. Nobody else sees them, but she sees them. Now, again, if I can go further in another month or so, and I forget exactly the timeline, she calls me in a panic on the phone, and she says, "Dr. Yama, please help me. I don't want to go to hell." You know? And she was terrified. So now she had another near-death experience, but it was a negative near-death experience. And in fact, these are in the literature. You know, I think maybe it looks like, you know, maybe a quarter of near-death experiences might be of the negative kind, maybe a little bit less. Okay, but she had a negative one, and she was convinced that she was in hell. And what actually happened, I mean, on the physical level, was that I think she broke her hip. She had an overdose of a ketamine, which was in this SAF form, and she didn't realize she was taking an overdose. She went into a coma. They took her to the hospital and airlifted her, and then they intubated her, in the process knocking out a couple of teeth. You know, but she's in another realm.
Right.
She feels that she is in hell, and it's a very, I can go on about just what hell looked like, but the essence of it was that she was taken to this place in an elevator, and you get off of the elevator, and there are people there that are being tortured by the devil, and the torture is he's making them look into the sun. Okay.
I've heard that somewhere. Not from you, but I've heard that before. Okay, sorry.
She's convinced this is totally real. Okay. Well, now, here we are meeting in my office, and so I'm trying to argue with her about the fact that, you know, it would be natural as a general, you know, normal psychologist would say, well, look, what you had was a hallucination. It seemed real. Look, somebody is, you know, manhandling you in the ER, they're shoving a tube down your throat, they're knocking down teeth. Who wouldn't think that they were in a kind of hell? So I'm thinking, you know, all of this is symbolic. It just represents how you felt, but you really weren't in hell. So there's a couple of reasons she gave me that she really felt that she was in hell. Now, this is the first one, which is, there's a couple, but this is the one that really stood out. So she's saying, well, okay, well, look, how come my eyes were so sensitive when she came to? You know, like she couldn't look at things anymore. She had to wear dark glasses. You know, her eyes hurt. And, you know, I'm going on and on about, you know, it would make sense if you thought or you imagined that you were in hell looking at the sun, that you would have some kind of sensitivity. And then she says to me, no, actually, it turns out that she had sunburned eyes, literal sunburned eyes. There was an ophthalmologist that came in and diagnosed her with sunburned eyes. Well, she's in the hospital and there's no sun around, right? So it's yeah. So okay. So there we go. So that's like now to me, I mean, we get to the evidence of survival here, which is pretty important. But like just something like that kind of knocks my socks off, right? Because how could it be? Well, anyway, okay, I'm going to take a breath.
No, you take a breath, and I'm just going to say the first thing that came into my mind was that she was in the ER. She was not responsive. They've got the lights right in her eyes, you know, and the light above also, you know, but they have the little one that they stick right in your face, and it's kind of like, you know, maybe her eyes were dilated or something.
Oh, I think that would be exactly would be the way I would think about it. But, you know, there's another alternative.
Yeah.
And so you probably know about stigmata, right? So there are people, among them Catholic religious saints. There's a long history of it. And there's documented cases of people who start showing the signs of Jesus' passion.
Yeah, I was going to ask if she was a religious woman.
Oh, she was, actually. She was.
Yeah, okay.
She was traditionally Christian. And that might have something to do with it. But I'm thinking, actually, this is pretty cool. So it's kind of like, just like stigmata, but a negative stigmata.
Okay.
You know, rather than, you know, something holy, something demonic. Okay. So anyway, I have more to tell. So then, as we're working together, she continues to be hounded with this idea that she's been to hell, and then strange things start happening around her house. She sees these ghoulish figures. She has these figurines that are kept in a curio cabinet that nobody can get into, but then a couple of them are missing, and she's in the other room in the kitchen, and then she hears laughter in the living room, and then she goes in that smash of glass, and she goes in, and like there's this glass figurine that was on top of a bookshelf that fell on the floor, cracked in a million pieces. And then there's also an episode where, you know, these figures, these ghoulish figures, looked like they were dripping blood, and there was literal blood on the floor that her husband saw and thought maybe it was the dogs that were in heat.
Yeah.
Okay. So now all of this is like, you know, she's very frightened. She doesn't even want to go to bed. To sleep. She won't sleep at night because she's afraid she'll go to hell. So, you know, Dr. Yama helped me. And now I'm working with her and just being as honest as I can, and I'm trying to explain I'm trying to explain it away in rational terms, as in she's just having a hallucination, but, you know, that's kind of hollow. And so she asked me, because of the stuff that's going on in our house, do I know anybody who can exorcise a demon, or can I exorcise a demon? And then we were kind of joking about that, and I said, no, I never had a class in exorcising demons. You know what I mean? And then I thought, I've got just the referral, which is the first patient I told you about. First patient, Carol, was actually experienced in expelling demons. Both women were much in the Christian tradition. They both had their first near-death experience during childbirth, and they both lived in the same little town in eastern Washington. You know, they didn't know each other, but it's a town of about like 4,000 people. You know, they were right there. And so I thought, I'll bring them together. Okay, so you see, by now, as far as being a psychologist, I have sort of left the reservation. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You asked me last time if I had ever, have you ever consulted with some of your colleagues about the kinds of things that you've seen? And I kind of didn't think very long to answer, and I think my answer, if I quote it, would be, no way.
Yeah, you don't tell them. There's a question in the chat room that I want to get to before we forget, and then we can jump right back.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, they want to know if her behavior and personality changed since the hell visit that she thought she had.
Her personality did not change. She was frightened.
Okay.
And very disturbed. But it didn't look like there was a personality change. Okay.
All right.
Later on, we're going to get to a personality change.
Okay.
But I suspect it's going to take another half an hour.
Yeah, well, we've got like 4 minutes before the break, so we can get there.
Okay. Well, let's think now. 4 minutes. Let's see. So, well, sure. So at this point, I brought the two women together. We met in Monica. I'm calling her Monica. Monica's home. She's the person who feels like she had gone to hell. Mm-hmm. And I was there with the two of them. I brought them together, and now, let's see. Now we have 3 minutes. Carol, just in the way I'm a psychologist, and you see somebody come in and you do sort of a diagnostic assessment. Does this person have X? Does they have Y? Do they have bipolar disorder? Are they depressed? So forth and so on. Mm-hmm. Carol, who's dispelled spirits, was doing the same thing. In her mind, it was a question of, was there a spirit in the house, that was doing this mischief? Mm-hmm. If not, was it, something within Monica? Or, and she was very open to this, maybe it's just some kind of dementia or some kind of, mental illness simply. So she's got her own, in psychology we call it the DSM. So she's got her own sort of psychic DSM going. Mm-hmm. And part of the strategy, we set this up ahead of time, was to come and check out the house. Is there a spirit, in the house of some kind? Mm-hmm. So I brought them together. They talked. We escaped down the stairs, and she was checking the house, and I was like right behind her. And she whispers to me after a stretch of time. She says, "I've got nothing. No spirits in the house." And she's very sensitive. She's what you would call sensitive, right? No spirits in the house, right? So that's maybe about where we should. Should I stop and you do your commercial, or
let's talk for another couple minutes? And
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So they met, Carol and Monica, my two patients, one single time. Mm-hmm. They didn't know each other previously. They knew some of the same people, but they did not know each other. They had never met. Okay, and that's actually kind of important for the story. All right, so this is what happens. Unfortunately, Carol passed away. She died of her cancer, and there's a whole nother story about efforts that I made with my little group of near-death experienced people. We did a kind of a ceremony, and there's stuff in there too. But for now, she simply passed away. And I was close enough to her that I and my other people in the group, we went to the funeral. Mm-hmm. But right after she passed away, and before the funeral, I had another meeting in my office with Monica. Mm-hmm. And so Monica is still distraught and still feeling like that she had gone to hell and she can't shake it. She's afraid of going to sleep because if she she feels like if she sleeps, she might be dragged to hell.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked her, she thought a lot of this meeting that she had with Carol. So I asked her, well, what would Carol say? After I had exhausted myself trying to reason with her, well, what would Carol say?
Mm-hmm.
And so then Monica pipes up and says, well, she's right here. Okay.
I would have liked to see the look on your face when she said that.
Well, I was amused. I mean, I was amused. I guess I wasn't quite believing this, right? At this point, I'm just kind of amused. Because I'm thinking, okay, she's here. All right, and then I said, I kind of upped the ante. And if you think about this as psychology, okay, what would Carol say? So then, okay, she's here in the room. So then I said, well, what does Carol say? If she's here, what does she say?
And take a breath. Let's go on. Let's dangle that carrot.
All right.
We'll take a break, and everybody stay put. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
All right.
There's more Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks right after these important messages. Missed an episode of Stirring the Cauldron? Then be sure to check out marlabrooks.com and check out the archive. And while you're there, check out Marla's weekly Witches Oracle card reading. Explore the site to find many great resources, such as information on tarot, oracle readings, metaphysical consultations, and links to all of Marla's books. That's marlabrooks.com.
I was in the hospital with my son for 18 months.
When he got injured, I wasn't prepared, but I knew I had to be strong.
When I was told about John's injury, I was in complete shock. I just remember rushing into his room and giving him a big hug and letting him know I was there.
These veterans and families are just a few of the heroes we serve at Homes for Our Troops. For thousands of severely injured veterans, everyday life is filled with barriers.
It was really the little things throughout the house. Counters that you can't roll up to. I had to drag my wheelchair down steps.
I want to help, but he is so determined.
At Homes for Our Troops, we build specially adapted custom homes with features like wheelchair access, rolling showers, and automatic door openers that allow them to function independently and focus on their recovery and family.
This house is freedom. It's hope. It's a new beginning.
This house has given me my family back.
To learn more, visit hfotusa.org.
Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
And we're talking to Dr. Mark Yama, and we just got to a really good point in the story, and they do that on TV all the time. Oh, we got to cut to a commercial.
That's right.
So, all right. I'll ask.
The psychic cliffhanger is what we got here. Yeah.
There you go. So here we go. So what did Carol say?
Well, first there's the mannerism of it, because she tilts her head to the side. It's like as if she's listening and she's tuning into something.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually I don't remember the exact. This will get more interesting in a second. I don't remember the first thing that she said. I think it might be something like trust in the Lord. You know what I mean? But then, I was kind of in a moment of just kind of playing with this. I was thinking, okay, well, if I got an actual spirit here, would there be something that only the spirit, Carol, would know? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else would know. Would only the spirit know? And now this impacts me quite a bit, because I actually made a mistake in writing the book, and I'll tell you what the mistake was. So Monica channeling, if I could say, is channeling Carol, and Carol tells her that she should know that whenever she sees that, what is it that I gave, that vase or flower that I gave you, that I'm still here, And in the book, I said, well, now wait a second, that didn't make any sense to me. At the time when I was writing the book, it didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. What flower? what vase. I thought about it at the time. I couldn't think of it. But in fact, well, in real life, Carol was a florist. And she always gave me these little gifts. And she actually gave me this little, it's just a really cute little, I don't know what to call it exactly, but you can't tell, once you look at that and you say it's a flower, because it looks like a flower, but it's also like a little tiny vase. And it's sitting up, in my kitchen, you know what I mean? And then sometime after I wrote the book, I'm thinking, oh my God, she told me exactly something only I would know. No one else would know that. And I didn't even know it at the time, which is interesting. Now, that's interesting that if we want to get theoretical here, there's this long-standing debate about whether when somebody claims to be giving information from the other side, whether it isn't instead that the medium, in this case, I'm going to say that Monica was like the medium, is simply reading the mind, right, of the sitter. But I wasn't aware of it, right? I wasn't aware of it at all. So, okay. Now, there's another thing that happened. It used to be when we had this little meeting of a group of us with near-death experiences, playfully, Carol and I would talk about auras. And a lot of times when we met, it was aura. We had this kind of like sort of stock, sort of like, we'd be messing around in, what should I say? No, it's like we would, I'd say in a teasing way, well, what color is my aura? Because she would see my aura, and supposedly my aura when I was in my true self would be yellow, but a lot of times it was blue. And, so sometimes when we have this little dialogue between the two of us, she'd say, well, it's still blue, like she's like, it's still blue. Okay.
Nothing changed, yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to this first meeting, channeling Carol. So in a moment of fun, and I am just kind of amused by this whole thing, which is so bizarre. I'm just thinking, it's just nuts. So I say to Monica, I got a question for Carol. What color is my aura? and then Monica says, and the intonation, it was just like, it's blue. Now, I actually had and now, this was kind of weird now. I've said to you, I don't have spiritual sensitivity, but maybe I have a little, because it was at that moment, it was as if I was looking through Monica and actually seeing, Carol, It just seemed very real to me. So, there is, okay, so anyways, here I have one person passing away, one client passes away, and it's like their spirit is alive in the other person. Now, let me tell you something else, too, that was really super interesting to me, is that Carol did not leave Monica's consciousness for a long time. I was amazed. Like, weeks later, we get together for another psychotherapy session, and she tells me, Carol tells me, that she's still with me. It's as if, in the psychological parlance, there was a multiple personality, which the multiple, or the alter, would be my client Carol, who is like this cheerful, bubbly person. And you see, a problem that Monica had was depression for a very long time. But, for the first time in years, she was lifted out of her depression. It's almost like a multiple personality, but a positive one. You know what I mean? That's therapeutic. Which to me is just like, whoa. I mean, whoa. And boggles the mind. Boggles the mind. Now, let's see. There is other evidence for the survival of Carol's spirit that is, just amazing, just amazing.
Mm.
And so let me see, I'll tell it in a kind of a sequence.
Mm-hmm.
So the first channeling, if you would, was almost immediately after Carol's death.
Mm-hmm.
A few days later, I went to the funeral, and I had never met Carol's sister, but she's very close to her sister, who was there, greeted me, and she said sort of excitedly, she squeezed my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And then I found out after the ceremony what she meant, and I'll tell you what she meant. So there was 2 viewings of the body, one
Mm-hmm.
for the public and then one for the family.
Mm-hmm.
And in the second viewing, her sister came to say goodbye. And you know how if you have somebody who's lying there, I guess whether they call it lying in state, and they have their hands sort of folded, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're in a casket, an open casket.
Mm-hmm.
So at last the sister, the last person to say goodbye, reaches over, squeezes her hand, but Carol squeezes back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is like, okay, squeezes back. And it was noticeable enough that it shocked the sister. She jumped
Mm-hmm.
back, okay? And then she said to me, also in this discussion, you should talk to, I forget what his name was, but the funeral director. Now, you're from a big city, I'm from a big city, but you see, this is a small town, and people know each other, and the funeral director knew Carol, and actually had done the entire funeral just gratis.
Nice.
Just because of his respect for her.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, so he told me a story briefly, and then I actually went back to this town and interviewed him. And what happened was this. So now he is this long-term mortician,
Mm-hmm.
and he told me, something happened that had only happened to him once like 25 years ago. And what happened was he had come back to the funeral parlor in the evening to do something or other,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a strong sense of Carol's spirit. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Her
Mm-hmm.
Carol's spirit. So, and then also, just to be complete here, like I'm being an academic here, and for completion, at her actual death when she died,
Mm-hmm.
Her husband had a sense of her spirit leaving. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, if you're not convinced about survival, I have my piece de resistance is about to, I'm going to tell you in a moment.
Okay.
But the thing is that, like, okay, why would somebody believe in this notion of survival? But, you could talk to one person's experience, but I have not just one person's experience. I've got all of these independent people,
Mm-hmm.
and you could say, well, one person, it's maybe their belief is making them imagine, the person's spirit. But that doesn't account for her, the corpse squeezing a hand. That doesn't account for the funeral director having an image separately, where he had one 25 years ago, now he has another one. It doesn't account for, all of these separate things that are sort of like, all aspects of this, let alone my patient, right,
Mm-hmm.
who's channeling her.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you're ready for the last piece of evidence?
Yes.
I hope you are. Okay. So now I'm having another meeting with. I got to keep these names straight because they're
Monica.
Yes, Monica, because I got the name, the actual name, and I got the name from the book.
I know.
Monica.
I know.
Okay. So, one of my group with the near-death experiences wanted to know. Can the dead communicate with the living? Can you communicate with those that you've left behind?
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked the question on behalf of this other person, can they? And so then we talk about, like, your husband. Would your husband know that you're around?
Mm-hmm.
And so she says, oh, yes. And, well, how was that? Well, some of the things that she did was to turn the lights on and off. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But she also said that, and this is the channeled, I'm getting the channeled information, is that she does things for him that he doesn't even know she's doing. And one of them is like he's in the dark and she likes a lot of light, so she opens curtains for him. And she gave him a flower. She remembers she's a florist. She gave him a flower, which is kind of interesting. So she gave him a flower. You know what kind of flower? Yes. And then my channeler or channel AD is saying it was red, and then in kind of a confused way said something like a red rose. Okay, so now after obtaining this information, I figure I might as well talk to the husband and check. So I call him up. Now, mind you, the husband has never met the person who's doing this channeling, okay? He doesn't know her, okay? But I ask him, is there anything going on around that would make you think, perhaps that Carol is still around? And so he says, she left me a flower. And so here, sitting on his CPAP machine, is this flower, which turned out to be not a red rose. It was a red carnation. But this had great significance for the couple because, they were first in love when Carol was 19 years old, but they didn't get married. And on her 19th birthday, this fellow, I forget his pseudonym, Dave. I call him Dave. Gave her a bouquet of 19 carnations, her favorite flower, so that's the symbolism of the carnation. And so Monica didn't pick up the exact flower, just that it was red, and that it was a flower, and it's like, oh, and then and then without my asking, I asked a very open-ended question. I didn't say, well, did somebody leave you a flower? I just asked, was anything unusual going on?
Yeah.
And he said he had come home. He was staying with his daughter. He had come home, and he had a strong sense of her presence, and the curtains were drawn apart. And he was thinking, how could this possibly happen? Because he closed them, and his daughter had some kind of explanation that had to do with, air from the vent, but he said, no, wait, that could happen. And he had a sense of her being there, and the curtains were drawn apart, because she likes the light, or she thinks that he would like it to have light, you see? Yeah. Okay. Well, so there you go. Now I've got a little academic point here to make, which maybe some of your audience knows, but should I shut up for a minute here?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Now, so I teach history of psychology, and which is like my favorite area, and I know all about William James, and actually this has really been marginalized, but there's a whole history of early research into psychic phenomena, through the British Society of, Psychic Research, and there's been a debate about survival, that goes back, 100 years. And I don't know what happened to the debate. Maybe it's just petered out and people have left, the field. But that was a hot debate 100 years ago. And William James had found this medium, Leonora Piper, as a matter of fact. And the thing about the medium, Leonora Piper, was that in trance, she had some kind of a control that she got information from, that is a other spirit that would communicate. And she would tell the sitter or people who were in the seance things that she had no right to know. And I could tell from your voice, okay, that makes sense, perfect sense to me. Well, you see now, all right, but it's easy to say, well, Leonora Piper, she was a medium. Maybe she was receiving money for her seance. Was it a performance? There are people who doubt, have all this doubt, but also there is no evidence ever that she. There was no evidence has ever been found that she was fraudulent.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it drives me absolutely nuts because if you read modern writers, they'll say, well, she was just so good at it. You know what I mean? It's just bullshit. I've been attuned to bullshit is the other thing I've been attuned to. But anyways, but now let's look at my person.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't hired as a medium. She wasn't a medium.
No, she had
the thing in common between the two of them is something kind of disassociative, I think, in a trance state, or my patient. I think there was, in other words, I think there was some psychological similarities.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's like, I'm just tripping over my thoughts here. Okay, so the big debate has always been when someone like Leonora Piper comes up with these things she shouldn't know. Is it really somebody on the other side, or is she just picking up the thoughts of the person who's, the sitter, right?
Yeah, which goes into telepathy, which is something completely different,
Right. But, that was a debate that raged. But I have to say, no, I've got the answer for you. Although those people who wanted the answer are long since dead, but I've got the answer for them. It can't possibly be, because think about what Carol was telling me. She was telling me stuff, or let's put it this way: Monica was telling me things through Shelley that only Shelley would know. Except there's no mind to reach. She's dead.
Well, that's the whole point, yes.
Right? So I think it's super convincing that it's not just telepathy. It's not just Monica being able to reach my mind.
Mm-hmm.
She's coming up with material that she could only get through somebody who's not there. And son of a gun.
Yeah. Yeah. See, and probably 90% of, well, not 90%, I can't do that, but there's a whole lot of people, but I guess I'm looking in the chat room, and I know who's in the chat room. Everybody is going, yeah, well, that always happens. We know this,
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's interesting, but let me...
I know.
Wait.
You said that last time, and I do believe I have kind of come late to the party, as it were.
That's okay. Well, here's a quote from Lily. She's a medium and stuff. She says, "I'm clairaudient. I hear it and then go from there. Never sure where the voice comes from. Could be Freudian. Could it be Jungian? Yeah. But she said you can even take Skinner there. Think about conditioning. Who conditions the psychic? So, I mean, it's a really big topic, but like, as you said, you're coming a little bit late to the party, but we've all been there. We've all thought, now how the hell did that happen? There have been people that, I think we've all heard something or felt something, or somebody told us from a reputable medium something that they had no idea of what they were talking about. I mean, they couldn't have known.
Right.
But it's really hard to convince people sometimes if they haven't had that experience. And you're never gonna pound it into somebody's head. You can't convince them until it happens. But all those things that you're saying are very true. And it happened. And so
I know. Well, here's the irony, though, because I could say, if we want to talk about life after death, I could simply say to someone, well, look at the data.
Well, that too. Yes.
No data.
Yeah, I know. This is, but that goes into what we were talking about one day about belief and opening up and just, not questioning things, just accepting as they come. And we kind of figured that we were going to be running close today. So any last couple of thoughts before we have to dawdle off around here?
Well, I don't know. We could say that there's a subtitle to our to the title of the talk, which is sort of the re-education of a former materialist. And that's me.
That sounds like a good book. Yeah. Because one of my guests said he wrote a book called Messages from a Reluctant Ghost Hunter or something like that. So it just kind of reminds me of that. But well, I'm really glad that your scientific mind is kind of chipping away a little bit at the wall.
That's so right. You are contributing to wearing me down. As a matter of fact, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll take that as a compliment.
It is. I appreciate being being worn down.
There you go. Okay. Yeah. All right. We got about. Go ahead.
Go ahead. How much do we have? How much time do we
have?
About
2 minutes. So I want if people want to get a hold of you, I want you to get about your information. But go ahead and say what you were going to say.
Oh, I was just going to say I've enjoyed being able to talk about this. And also to be able to talk to an audience that can appreciate it. I mean, it's like if I tell anyone in the regular psychological world, it's a different. Actually, everybody has been kind of kind, but I think they might just think I'm
patting you
I've
on
lost my
head.
mind. They kind of just have this. We'll just be gentle with him. Who knows what happened to his mind?
Yeah.
But I get a chance to talk to people who are not just receptive, but have this whole other world of experience. So that's great. It's fun to talk about. Fun to talk about too. So I appreciate the chance. I'm sorry in a sense it was such a monologue, but it took the whole hour for me to get it all out. And there you go.
That's good because they were talking earlier in the chat room that you should come back and tell some more things like that. So, see, you're not spewing air for no reason. All right, okay. Where can people find you if they're looking for you?
Well,
if they have any questions or if they need a clinical psychologist, whatever.
Okay. I would just email me. I don't really have a web presence, and we talked about this some, but actually that's. I don't have a web presence, but I have an email, which is M as in Mark, my first name, Yama, Y-A-M-A, M-Yama, at uidaho.edu. So it's uidaho.edu.
Okay.
Be happy to have an email and
pick up where you left off and talk about something or answer questions. And very good.
Sure.
All right. Well, again, thank you. And we'll be in touch. And, down the line, you're welcome to come back and we'll talk some more about it.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I think everybody have a good night or day if you're listening on the podcast. And blessed be. And merry meet again.
Right.
Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more fun. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2009.
You have been listening to the Para X Radio Network.